Over those years, did you ever have to use your EMT on not just the first year, but all over the was it 4 or 5 years you jumped?
No.
You never had to, huh? That's
No.
amazing. Never called you in for that.
No.
Well, what were you doing in the off season?
Well, I had graduated from the university then, and when did I graduate? I started in '64, so graduated in, graduated in '69. And I graduated in education, so I'd been over here in Helena to do practice teaching, and I got a call from the assistant superintendent over there. He said, "Well, you came over here to do your practice teaching, but we didn't get an application from you, and we want to know why." I said, "Well, I thought I might try to apply in Billings." He said, "Why do you want to go to Billings?" And I said, "Well, I've been at the university now, going on 5 years, living over here in Missoula. And between the smoke and the inversion over here and the weather, I wanted to be someplace where there's sunshine, and Chamber of Commerce said there were more days of sunshine in Billings than any other place in the state. So I'm going to apply in Billings." I said, "What'd they say about Helena?" And he convinced me to come back. So I came, and I've been here ever since. And that was the off season. So
You were teaching school.
Yeah, typical kind of scenario where I was teaching in school, and then I jumped in '71, and then a fellow that I went to the university with was a finance officer, and for the Forest Service, and he was working out of Coeur d'Alene, and they had a YSCC program, a Youth Conservation Corps program, and they needed a director for their camp. And said, "Come and do it. What are you getting there at the base? What are you, a 6?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a 6." He said, "Well, we'll make you a 9. We'll put you in charge of this crew, and you come on with this crew." So, yeah, I said, "Yeah, that's a great deal. Count me in." So I didn't go back. I went to Priest Lake and ran the Youth Conservation Corps for a couple of seasons, and then the travel distance got a little long, and so I wanted something a little closer, so I was applying in Montana, and they had a YCC program out of Benchmark, and I ran it out of Benchmark.
Up at the Ball Marshall?
Yeah, for 2 years. And then I said, "Well, this is a run of good luck here. Let's see if I can get closer to home yet." And Helena had a program going, and they were looking for a crew manager. So I applied and did it here in Helena for 2 years.
Well, okay, so you're a teacher, but you've also had that outdoor experience. You had a chance to apply it with 3 YCC plus an IR crew. So you've got some pretty good experience with that whole adventure training type thing, I guess. Any thoughts on what a good program would look like if we were going to scarf up lots of young people and do something with them? How would you do it?
You mean put together a rough crew and,
a big one,
and
like
have them
what's the best way to do that?
Absorb some of that stuff? Well, I think one of the most profound things that I discovered about youth was that you couldn't make it primitive enough for them. If you put them in an environment like when at Priest Lake, they were in the old experimental forest over there, and in the headquarters buildings, And all of those buildings had been constructed by craftsmen with the CCC program, Roosevelt's CCC program, during the Depression. Oh, they're just gorgeous tongue and groove stuff and fitted stuff, and the carpentry in there was just beautiful, and solidly built stuff, and well kept and well maintained, and they didn't have an appreciation for it. The kids that were there did not appreciate the skills that went into putting that thing together. They were living pretty large. I mean, they had running water, they had flush toilets, they had electricity, they had beds with springs, etc., etc., etc. And the work was okay, and it was demanding and that sort of thing. But they didn't really like any of the work until it became really physical. And the thing that I noticed, first of all, was that when we put them to work bucking logs, sawing logs into stove-length pieces into rounds, and then splitting those rounds and ricking them and stacking them into cords. And they did that for about a week, and they loved it. Just absolutely loved the physicality of all of that, of working as a team and cutting and chopping that and stacking it, and it was all physical and movement, and they were all engaged in that process. But if you give them a pair of nippers and ask them to walk along the road and clear back the brush, well, that was...
Yeah.
But so physicality, and then primitive, and where I learned this is when I went to Benchmark. All the kids showed up, and the crew showed up, and the staff was staying in kind of a barrack situation, the kids all had tents, but when they showed up, they said, "Where are we staying?" And I said, "Well, you haven't built it yet." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, you see those big rolls of canvas? Those are your tents. And we got to go cut some poles, and we got to get the rope out, and you're going to have to put these things up." And that's when they really appreciated those things. They took care of them, they put them up, and they cleaned them out, and you were always tinkering and trying to make it better and make it more livable and that sort of thing. So they really appreciated it, man, and they got to go inside the building once in a while, and I said, "This is just strange." What's strange? Being in a building. It's so neat. These are scabby old buildings out there, but it was a treat for them to be inside. It was a treat for them to sit on a bench, to go down to have their supper or breakfast, and to sit on a bench at a table, and they really learned to appreciate that. And I took that lesson. So something, if you're going to put together some kind of a crew and teach them skills, you want to keep it really primitive. Years later, when I worked with an adjudication program here where they took kids into the wilderness and really broke them down, they didn't have any utensils to work with. They had to earn the privilege to use one knife in a crew, one knife, and to carve their own spoons so that they could eat. And then they had to, if they were good enough, they could use the knife again to make their own fire kit. Then they had to make fire with a stick and a bowl. And you talk about a level of appreciation for things. A chair to sit in, a cushion for the chair, central heating instead of building yourself a little fire, having silverware as opposed to one hand-carved wooden spoon that you crafted out of some piece of wood out there.
As an educator, did you think there was a real positive benefit from them paying closer attention because of that?
Yeah.
Were they open to other things?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They wanted a spoon to eat with. No. Well, why not? Because you know, you lied this morning, or
Yeah.
you know, you said that you weren't cold, but you were sitting there shaking, and you know, and you were in the first stage of hypothermia. Why weren't you honest about it? Well, you know, we're supposed to be tough out here. No, you're not. You're supposed to be honest out here. And yeah, it's just stuff like that where they learn that there are some rules about honesty and truthfulness and respect, and that translated into trust on the other party's part. If you're being truthful and honest and respectful, then people begin to trust you and believe in you and count on you. Yeah. Very, very important kind of a process. But watching all of that kind of thing happen, if you were going to build something, keep it real primitive and go slow with it. Let them earn all the kind of privileges. And I looked at the Smokejumper program and talked to some of the base managers. I talked to Eddie Ward about it, and who's the base manager now? Mike. No, name eludes me at the moment. But have talked to him about it. And I asked him, how do you bring guys along? Real slowly. There's no prima donnas that we just push to the forefront, you know. They got to learn every aspect of the job, you know.
This is new jumpers.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, but everybody that stays in the program, they're bringing them along slowly and exposing them to all the different aspects of the organization. And I think there's a real value to that, and the value is that it becomes integrated as part of their core being, and they won't even recognize it after a few years. It's just the way they do things. That it makes sense, it's safe, it's rational, it fits with the rest of the design, the major strategies, and it's just an inherent part of their process.
You know what? So, are you saying that's what happens to most jumpers? They get imbued with something through that process, or do you think there's anything unique about that experience? Or it's just another organization?